I was cleaning my son's office when his laptop lit up with a new email. The subject line said, "Re the old lady problem, final solution." I opened it, my hands shaking, and saw messages to someone called The Fixer. Then I heard a knock at my door. It was the FBI. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The screen glowed in the dim quiet of my son's home office. I was dusting. A weekly ritual when Marcus was at work. A small tending to the space of a man too busy to tend to himself. The laptop, usually a closed silver lid, had woken up. A notification box hovered over the icons. Read the old lady problem, final solution. My hand, holding the rag, stopped mid-swipe across the mahogany desk. The words were not meant for me. They were a secret, left in the open by a machine's indifference. A cold, clear dread, like a chip of ice, slipped down my spine. I set the rag down. My fingers, which had turned thousands of library book pages, now hovered over the keyboard. I did not consider ethics. A mother's fear bypasses such things. I tapped the trackpad. The email chain opened. The top message was from someone called Fixer. The address was a jumble of numbers and letters. The reply was from Marcus, my Marcus. The subject line was a fist to my chest. The old lady problem. I read. The language was cold, clinical. It discussed assets, liquidity events, and ongoing financial drains. It referenced a property, my bungalow, and its unrealized potential. My son wrote about timelines and obstacles. The Fixer wrote about methods that left no trace, about accidents that could be arranged. He mentioned a price. Marcus replied that the quoted figure was high, but he understood the premium for discretion. He asked for a clearer schedule. He ended his last message with, "Let's finalize. The situation is becoming a persistent stress." I stood very still. The room, filled with Marcus's expensive leather chair and framed finance awards, seemed to warp. The air grew thin. I was the situation. I was the persistent stress. I was the old lady problem. My body moved before my mind could fully command it. There was a printer on the credenza. I found the print command. The machine hummed, and pages began to slide into the tray. Each one was a betrayal, made physical. I gathered them, the paper warm from the process. I did not fold them. I placed them in a neat stack on the desk. I needed to see them to hold the proof. Otherwise, my mind would surely dismiss this as a nightmare. As I stood there, the printed pages in my hand, a firm knock sounded at my front door. Not Marcus's quick rap. This was authoritative, solid. 3 precise strikes. The sound seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. I walked from the office, through the living room with its familiar Afghans and family photos, a gallery of lies. I approached the door. Through the frosted glass, I saw 2 silhouettes, broad-shouldered and patient. I opened the door. A black man and an Asian woman stood on my porch. They were dressed in dark suits. The man was older, his hair graying at the temples, his face bearing the calm, weary lines of someone who has seen too much. The woman was younger, her expression alert and neutral. The man held up a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a badge and identification. "Mrs. Ella Washington?" he asked. His voice was deep, respectful. "Yes." "I'm Agent Terrence Waters. This is Agent Lim. We're with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. May we come in?" They already knew my name. They were at my door minutes after I'd read the words. The connection was immediate and terrifying. This was not a private family horror. This was something larger, and it had already caught the attention of the federal government. I stepped back. "Please." They entered, their shoes quiet on my hardwood floor. Agent Waters' eyes did a slow, appreciative sweep of the room, the tidy shelves, the well-cared-for furniture, the peace I had built. His gaze held no threat, only a measured assessment. "We're sorry to disturb you, ma'am," he said. "We have an active investigation. It involves an individual using the online alias The Fixer. Our cyber division flagged recent communications to an email account linked to your residence. He was being careful, not naming Marcus yet. He was watching me, gauging my knowledge. I felt a strange detachment settle over me. The initial shock was hardening into something usable, like clay going cold. "You found the emails," I stated. It wasn't a question. Agent Waters' eyes sharpened just slightly. "You're aware of them?" "I became aware of them approximately 10 minutes ago." My voice sounded far away, perfectly steady. "They are on my son's laptop, in his study. I printed them." Agent Lim exchanged a glance with Waters. There was no surprise in it, only a confirmation. "Mrs. Washington," Agent Waters said, his tone softening into something that approached gentleness. "The individual known as the Fixer is a person of interest in multiple cases of fraud, coercion, and suspected homicide. The nature of the communications we intercepted is extremely serious. We need to talk to you." I led them to the kitchen. I moved automatically, filling the kettle, setting out cups. The ritual of hosting provided a scaffold for my sanity. They sat at my oak table, the same table where Marcus had done his homework, where we had shared countless meals. While the water heated, I retrieved the printed emails. I placed the stack between us on the table. Agent Lim put on a pair of gloves and gently pulled them toward her. She began to read, her face a mask. "Can you tell us about your son, Mrs. Washington?" Agent Waters asked. He had not touched his tea. "His name is Marcus. He is 42. He works in finance. He lives downtown but visits every Sunday." I recited facts. They were safe. The other facts, that he was my only child, that I worked 2 jobs to put him through college, that his father left before he could walk, those facts felt dangerous now. They were the fuel for this betrayal. "And your relationship with him?" Waters' question was clinical, but his eyes were not. "It has been good." The past tense slipped out. I corrected myself. "It is good. I thought it was good." The steadiness in my voice cracked, just a hair. I took a sip of hot water. I had forgotten to add the tea bag. Agent Waters leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Mrs. Washington, based on these communications, we believe you may be in potential danger. We also believe Marcus is involved in a conspiracy to commit a serious crime against you. We would like your cooperation in our investigation." The words "potential danger" hung in the air. They did not shock me. I had already absorbed that truth from the screen. The word "cooperation" was different. It was a door, and I was standing on its threshold. "What does cooperation mean?" I asked. "It means allowing us to monitor the situation. It means, if you are willing and it can be done safely, gathering information for us. It means helping us build a case to stop the Fixer and to hold anyone working with him accountable." He was offering me a role, not just as a victim, but as a participant. I looked at the emails on the table. I saw the phrase "final solution" again. A cold resolve began to form in my gut, beneath the heartbreak. It was a small, hard knot. "My son discussed my death as a financial transaction," I said, the words clear and dry. "He called me a problem." I looked directly at Agent Waters. "What do you need me to do?" He held my gaze for a long moment. He saw the shift in me. He gave a slow, single nod. "First, we need to discuss security. Then, we need to talk about how we proceed. It will require you to act normally with Marcus, even when it is difficult." I thought of Sunday dinners, of his smile that no longer seemed warm but calculated. I thought of the loneliness that must have festered in him to lead to this. The anger came then, not as a fire, but as a deep, permafrost cold. It stabilized me. "Acting normally will not be difficult," I said. "I have had a lifetime of practice. A mother always knows when her child is lying. I just chose, for too long, to call it something else." Agent Waters gave a slow, approving nod. My response had not been the one of a hysterical victim. It was the assessment of a strategist. That was the person I needed to be now. The first thing, Agent Waters said, is your immediate safety. The fixer operates on contracts. He has no personal motive. If Marcus were to call off the arrangement, the direct threat from that quarter would likely dissipate. However, we are not at that stage. We need evidence, and for that, we need the arrangement to appear active. Agent Lim spoke, her voice cooler, more technical. We have surveillance on the email account. If Marcus sends or receives any new communication, we will know. We also have a trace on the fixer's digital footprint, though he is skilled at covering his tracks. Your son is not. His condo and his office are under physical observation. Hearing the words, your son, in that context, paired with surveillance and observation, made the reality concrete. Marcus was a subject in a federal investigation. My child was a suspect. What is your role, Mrs. Washington? Agent Waters continued. For now, it is observation and information. You go about your life. You see Marcus as you normally would, but you listen. You note any changes in his behavior, any new pressures he mentions, any unusual questions about your health, your routines, your property. You are our insider. You want me to spy on my son. I stated it plainly. We want you to protect yourself and help us prevent a crime, he corrected gently but firmly. The information you provide could save your life and stop a dangerous criminal. It could also determine whether your son faces conspiracy charges or something much more severe. The choice was an illusion. There was only one path forward. To do nothing was to wait for an accident to be arranged. My cooperation was now a form of self-preservation. I understand, I said. What should I be listening for? Agent Waters pulled a small notebook from his inner jacket pocket. Financial stress. He mentioned it in the emails. Listen for complaints about money, about debts, about his job. Listen for any mention of your house, its value, any suggestion that you might be better off somewhere else. Listen for any references to new friends, business associates, or anyone doing work for him, especially handymen or contractors. The word contractor sent a fresh chill through me. The fixer's methods, Waters had implied, often looked like accidents, a faulty step, a misplaced pill, a gas leak. He is coming for Sunday dinner, I said, tomorrow. Both agents focused on me completely. That is excellent, Waters said. You will act exactly as you always do. The only difference is that you will be listening with new ears. After he leaves, you will write down everything you remember about the conversation, word for word if possible. Do not record him, not yet. That comes later, with equipment we provide, and only if we determine it is safe and necessary. He may ask if anyone has visited me, I pointed out. Your car is outside. A valid concern, Agent Lim said. You can say a pair of missionaries stopped by. It is a common enough occurrence. We will be less visible moving forward. We discussed logistics. They gave me a dedicated, secure, mobile phone. It looked like an ordinary older model. It had 2 numbers programmed into it, one for Agent Waters, one for Agent Lim. I was to use it only for communications related to the investigation. I was to keep it charged and hidden. Do not confront him, Mrs. Washington, Waters said as they prepared to leave. His tone was grave. No matter what he says, no matter how much it hurts, your emotional reaction is justified, but it cannot surface yet. The priority is the integrity of the investigation and your safety. Your feelings must wait. I nodded. I had become good at making feelings wait. I had waited through lonely nights working the late shift at the library while Marcus slept at a friend's house. I had waited for his teenage anger to pass. I had waited for him to find his way. This would be the final, most terrible wait. After they left, the house was silent, but the silence was different. It was now a listening silence. I cleared the teacups, washed them, dried them, put them away. Each movement was routine, but my mind was a hive of new calculations. I walked to the living room and stood before the wall of photographs. There was Marcus at 6, missing a front tooth, holding a trophy from a science fair. I had sold my mother's pearl earrings to buy the materials for his volcano. There he was at 18, in his cap and gown, his arm around me. My pride had been a physical ache. The smile in that photo, his smile, was it already a performance? When did the resentment begin? Was it when I declined to take out a second mortgage to invest in his friend's startup? Was it when I gently refused to sign over the deed to my house as collateral for his condo? I had called it prudence. He must have called it obstruction. I had seen the stress in him over the past year, the sharpness in his voice during phone calls, cut short by his need to get back to work, the expensive gifts that felt less like generosity and more like payments. I had chosen to interpret it as the pressure of his career, of a man wanting to prove his success. I had made excuses. A mother's intuition, it seems, had been whispering the truth all along, and I had turned the volume down. Now I turned it up. I replayed every recent interaction, every complaint he had voiced. The market was brutal. His property taxes were staggering. His bonus had been less than expected. He had mentioned just 2 weeks ago how much equity was locked up in my big old place and how I might not want the burden of stairs as I got older. I had laughed it off. Now the words glinted with malicious intent. I sat down at my small writing desk. I took out a fresh sheet of paper from the drawer. At the top, I wrote the date. Then I began, in my clear librarian script, to document everything I could remember Marcus saying in the last 3 months about money, about my house, about my health. It was not yet evidence for the FBI, it was evidence for me. A ledger of betrayal, written in my own hand. The act of writing steadied me. It transformed the swirling horror into data points. Each remembered sentence was a piece of the puzzle I was now committed to solving. The new phone, heavy in my pocket, was a tether to a world I never wanted to enter, but it was also a lifeline. Tomorrow, Sunday, would be the first test. I would serve pot roast and listen. I would pass the cornbread and analyze. I would smile with a mother's affection, while behind my eyes, a new, colder woman would be taking notes. The dishes from Sunday dinner were clean, dried, and put away. The silence after Marcus left was a palpable thing, thick with the echoes of his words. He had talked about market volatility. He had mentioned a colleague whose mother had a very peaceful transition into a full-care facility upstate. He had complimented the pot roast, but his eyes had wandered around my living room, assessing, as if measuring it for new occupants. I had performed my role. I had nodded at the right moments. I had offered seconds. I had not reacted when he said, "You know, Mom, you've worked hard all your life. You deserve to be taken care of, not to be burdened with this big house." My smile had remained fixed, a practiced mask of maternal placidity. Inside, the cold knot had tightened. Now, in the deep night, sleep was impossible. The house creaked with familiar sounds, but each one felt suspect. I rose from my bed, wrapped myself in a robe, and went to the hall closet. From the top shelf, I pulled down 3 large leather-bound photo albums. Their weight was familiar and comforting. I carried them to the kitchen table, under the bright, unforgiving light. I opened the first album. The plastic pages crackled. Here was Marcus as a newborn, swaddled in a blue blanket, my much younger face gazing down at him with a mix of terror and awe. Here he was at 5, on a swing, his head thrown back in laughter. I had pushed him for an hour that day, my arms aching just to hear that sound. I turned the page. The science fair trophy. The memory of pawning my mother's pearls was sharp. I had told him I found a great deal on the supplies. His winning project had been on plant biology. He had been so proud. I had been proud of his pride. The photographs were a linear narrative of love and sacrifice. My hands, now lined with veins and age spots, were smooth in these pictures, always working, fixing a bicycle chain, typing a paper for him late at night, decorating a birthday cake. The progression showed him growing taller, handsomer, moving away. My smiles in the later photos were tighter, tinged with the loneliness of an emptying nest, but still genuine, still believing in the story we were in. I reached the final album, his college graduation, my arm around him, my face radiant. He was smiling too, but now, with my new knowledge, I searched his eyes. Was there a strain there? A resentment hidden behind the grin? Had he already begun to see me not as his foundation, but as a future obstacle? The contrast between the boy in these pages and the man in the emails was grotesque. The boy I had nursed through fevers had discussed my death as a final solution. The child I read to every night had called me a persistent stress. The love documented in these albums felt like evidence against me. What had I done to warp it into this? A pain, sharp and phantom, lanced through my chest. It was not a heart attack. It was the physical manifestation of a breaking bond. I placed a hand over the spot and breathed through it. The tears that came were silent and hot. They were not for the man he was now. They were for the boy in the pictures, the boy who was gone, perhaps had never truly existed in the way I believed. I could not sit with this alone. The silence was becoming poisonous. I needed a voice that was not the echoing betrayal in my head. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 3 a.m. It was late, but not for Lorraine. She was a night owl, often watching old movies or tinkering with her computer projects into the early hours. I picked up my personal phone and dialed her number. It rang 4 times. Ella? Her voice was alert, not sleepy. What's wrong, honey? It's the middle of the night. Just hearing her voice, warm and full of immediate concern, made my throat tighten. I had to force the words out. Lorraine, something has happened. Something terrible. Are you hurt? Are you sick? Her tone shifted to urgent practicality. No, not physically. It's Marcus. I said his name, and it hung between us, a dark fact. There was a pause on the line. What about Marcus? Did he have an accident? No. I drew a steadying breath. He has been talking to a man, a criminal. They were discussing me, how to get rid of me. The silence from Lorraine's end was total. Then, Ella Washington, you tell me exactly what you mean right now. Get rid of you how? They called me the old lady problem. They talked about methods, accidents. They discussed the value of my house. My voice was flat, reciting facts. It was the only way to say it. Oh, my sweet Lord. Lorraine's whisper was a prayer and a curse. You have proof? I found the emails on his laptop. I printed them. And then, the FBI was at my door. They are investigating the other man. They know all about it. They want my help. The story spilled out of me then, in a calm, chronological monologue. The glowing screen, the agents, the new phone, the dreadful dinner. Lorraine listened without a single interruption. When I finished, the line was quiet for a long moment. That little bastard. Her words were low, fierce, and final. There was no doubt, no questioning my interpretation. Her immediate belief was a balm. That ungrateful, selfish little bastard. After all you did. After everything. Her anger on my behalf was a fire I could warm my cold hands by. The FBI has the emails, I said, but I have copies too. I don't understand all of the jargon they used, the financial terms. You bring those copies to me, Lorraine said, her voice now full of determined energy. You come over first thing in the morning. We will go through every word. I might not know all the finance talk, but I know how to research, and I know how people try to hide their meaning. We will figure out what that snake was really planning. I don't want to drag you into this, I said, even though her involvement was exactly what I needed. You are not dragging me. I am jumping in. This is what family does, and I am more your family than that. That man is right now. Her conviction was absolute. You get some rest if you can. Be at my house at 9. We'll have coffee and we'll read, and then we'll decide what to do next. The FBI said not to confront him. And they're right, Lorraine said. Confronting is for later. First we understand. Then we outsmart. You hear me? We are going to outsmart him. We said our goodbyes. I closed the photo albums and returned them to the closet. The ghost of the little boy was put back on the shelf. The man he became was the problem to be solved. Lorraine's words echoed. We will decide what to do next. For the first time since seeing that glowing screen, I felt a tremor that was not fear or grief. It was the first stirring of agency. I was not just a problem to be solved. I was becoming a strategist. The night was still dark, but a path, narrow and grim, was beginning to reveal itself. The morning light felt harsh, exposing. I dressed with careful normality, choosing a simple lavender dress. I placed the folded copies of the emails into my large handbag, next to my wallet and keys. The secure FBI phone was left at home, hidden in a flower canister. I drove to Lorraine's house with a focused calm. The streets of our neighborhood, with their broad oaks and well-kept lawns, looked the same, but I was now a stranger moving through them. Lorraine's bungalow was a cheerful contrast to my own subdued space, painted a bright yellow with white trim. She opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a tight, wordless hug. She smelled of coffee and gardenia perfume. She held me for a long moment, then stepped back, her hands on my shoulders, her eyes searching mine. You look like you haven't slept, but you look solid, she pronounced. Come on in. The coffee's strong and the table is clear. Her kitchen table was indeed clear, except for 2 laptops, a notepad, several pens, and a pot of coffee. Sunlight streamed in through the window over her sink. It was a workspace, not a morning space. I sat down and pulled the emails from my bag. I slid them across the table to her. She put on a pair of reading glasses that hung on a beaded chain and began to read. I watched her face. Her expressive mouth tightened into a thin line. Her eyebrows climbed. She let out a low whistle. Cold, she said finally, looking up. Just pure transactional cold. She tapped a specific line. This here, about liquidity events. That's finance talk for turning an asset into cash. Your house is the asset. You are the obstacle to the liquidity. He mentioned my property taxes, I said, and my stairs. Setting the stage, Lorraine nodded. She opened one of the laptops. Let's see what we can find about this fixer person. The FBI has their methods, but so does Google. Her fingers flew over the keys. She typed in phrases from the emails, combinations of words. She searched news archives for unsolved accidents involving seniors. Most searches came up empty or led to generic forums. But then she paused. Look here, she said, turning the screen to me. It was a local news article from a nearby county 2 years old. An elderly man had died in a fall down his basement stairs. The article mentioned he had been in dispute with a development company that wanted his land. The case was ruled an accident. There was a quote from a nephew expressing satisfaction with the police finding. You think that's him? I asked, a new layer of ice forming in my gut. I think it's a pattern, Lorraine said grimly. This fixer, he doesn't get his hands dirty. He engineers coincidences. He finds the pressure points in a family and pushes. She looked back at the emails. Marcus gave him all your pressure points, your routines, the value of your house, your stubborn independence. She read the phrase from the email with disgust. We spent an hour parsing every sentence. Lorraine looked up financial jargon. We made a list on the notepad. Marcus's apparent debts, the estimated value of my property, the timeline he was pushing for. It was a business proposal for my elimination. When we had exhausted the document, Lorraine sat back and sipped her coffee. So, the FBI wants you to act normal and listen. Yes, and they may want you to wear a wire later. They mentioned that as a possibility. Lorraine looked at me, her gaze sharp and assessing. What do you want, Ella? The question was simple, but it was the first time anyone had asked it. The FBI wanted a successful investigation. Lorraine wanted justice. But what did I want? The raw, screaming part of me wanted my son back. That was no longer an option. The quieter, colder part was taking shape. I want him to face what he's done, I said, my voice even, not just from the law. I want him to understand that I know that I saw his calculation. I want his betrayal to be for nothing. I want to be the one who stops him. A slow smile spread across Lorraine's face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of fierce recognition. Now you're talking. So being passive bait isn't enough. You want to be active bait. You want to help them build the case, but on your terms. How? By knowing more than they think you know. By steering conversations. You said he mentioned a facility upstate. Next time, you ask him about it. Show interest. Make him think his plan is working. That will make him careless. He might contact this fixer sooner, say the target is becoming amenable. That's evidence. It was a dangerous suggestion. It meant engaging with the plot, not just observing it, but it also meant taking control of a small part of the trap. The FBI would have to approve it, I said. Of course. You tell Agent Waters your idea. You present it as a way to gather more concrete evidence faster. You show him you're not a fragile old lady who needs coddling. You're an asset. Lorraine's eyes were bright with strategic fire. They'll go for it. It makes their job easier and safer for you if they're directing the play. I looked down at the notepad, at our neat list of betrayals. The sorrow was still there, a vast, dark lake beneath me. But I was no longer drowning in it. I was building a raft on its surface, plank by calculated plank. I'll call Agent Waters this afternoon, I said. I'll suggest a meeting. I'll tell him I am ready to be more actively involved under their guidance. I want to record my next conversation with Marcus. There it is, Lorraine said softly. Strategy over sorrow. We spent another 30 minutes planning what that active role might look like. Possible questions I could ask, topics to avoid, how to signal distress if a conversation went wrong. It was like rehearsing for the most terrible play ever written. When I left Lorraine's house, the sun was higher, the day warmer. The weight in my handbag was now the weight of a plan, not just the weight of evidence. The heartbreak was not gone. It was compartmentalized, placed in a locked room inside me. The space it left behind was now occupied by a new, steely purpose. I was no longer just Ella Washington, the betrayed mother. I was a cooperating witness with an agenda. The game had begun, and I intended to learn the rules better than my opponent. The device was smaller than I expected. A flat, flesh-colored disc with a tiny microphone attached to a transmitter no larger than a deck of cards. Agent Waters had shown me how to secure it against my skin, under my clothing. The wire was not a wire at all, but a thin, flexible antenna. He tested the feed. My voice, when I recited a recipe for cornbread, sounded clear and close in the headphones Agent Lim wore from her car parked 2 streets over. Remember, Waters had said, his demeanor professional but with an undercurrent of concern. Do not force it. Let the conversation flow naturally. If he says nothing of value, that is still data. Your safety and your calm are the priorities. We are listening the entire time. Now, standing in my kitchen, I pressed the device into place. I wore a loose, high-necked blouse that concealed any slight bulge. The transmitter rested against the small of my back, held by an elastic band. I checked my reflection. I looked like myself. Ella Washington preparing Sunday dinner. The pot roast simmered. The cornbread was in the oven, filling the house with its warm, buttery scent. I set the table with my good china, a habit reserved for Sundays. Each movement was part of the performance, but also a deep, aching muscle memory. How many Sundays had I done this? How many times had I looked forward to the sound of his key in the lock? Right on time, I heard it. The turn of the deadbolt, his footsteps in the hall. "Mom, it smells amazing in here." "In the kitchen, Marcus," I called back, my voice steady. I was stirring the gravy. He entered, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I did not flinch. I turned my face to receive the kiss, my skin registering it as a dry, brief pressure. He was dressed in casual, expensive clothes, a polo shirt and tailored trousers. He looked tired. There were new lines around his eyes that I now recognized not as markers of hard work, but of strain. "How was your week?" I asked, carrying the roast to the table. "Brutal," he said, sitting down. "Just brutal. The market is a nightmare. My portfolio took a hit, and the quarterly reports are due." He spoke as he always did, assuming I wouldn't understand the specifics, only the tone of complaint. I sat across from him. "That sounds very stressful." I passed him the platter of meat. "You mentioned last week about a colleague's mother, the one who moved to that facility. What was it called again?" He looked up, a flicker of interest in his eyes. It was the look of a fisherman feeling a tug on the line. "Oh, Pine Ridge, up near the mountains. Beautiful place, they say. All inclusive." "All inclusive," I repeated, serving myself some green beans. That must be a relief for the family, not having to worry. "Exactly," he said, his voice gaining animation. "It's a huge weight off. And financially, it can make sense too. Selling a big old house like this covers the costs for years, frees up capital." The words were a near-perfect echo of the email's intent. I cut a piece of roast. "This house isn't so big, and it's paid for. The taxes are manageable." "For now," he said, a hint of impatience seeping through. "But things change, Mom. Your needs could change. Stairs, maintenance. It's a lot for one person. I worry." "That's kind of you," I said, my tone neutral. "But I'm doing just fine. I like my independence." I took a bite, chewed slowly. The food tasted like dust. He sighed, a sound of manufactured frustration. "I just want what's best for you, and honestly, what's best for me, too. This constant worry, it's a distraction I can't afford right now. With the market the way it is, I need to be focused. I have obligations, debts that aren't going away." There it was, more specific than before. Debts. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "Is there anything I can do to help?" He looked at me, and for a second I saw a glimmer of the old shame. The boy who didn't want to admit he needed help, but it was quickly smothered by a harder, more desperate expression. "You're doing enough just by listening," he said, but his words were empty. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "Don't worry, things will get easier soon. I'm working on a solution." A cold ripple passed through me. A solution. The same language from the emails. I kept my eyes on my plate. I'm sure you are. The rest of the meal passed with mundane talk about the weather, a neighbor's new car, a movie he had seen. It was all surface noise. The important data had been transmitted. His financial pressure, his fixation on my house's capital, his reference to an imminent solution. Every word had been captured by the device against my skin. He declined dessert, saying he had an early conference call. Another lie, most likely. At the door, he hugged me. His embrace felt like a negotiation. "Take care of yourself, Mom," he said. "I always do," I replied. I closed the door behind him and locked it. I stood there, listening to his car start and drive away. Then I walked to the kitchen. I removed the transmitter and the microphone disc. I placed them on the table. My hands, which had been so steady serving the cornbread, began to tremble. It was a fine, uncontrollable vibration. I sat down, the weight of the performance crashing down. I had just successfully deceived my son. I had drawn out his malice and sent it to the FBI. It was a victory, small and terrible. The personal cost was a hollowing out. The love that had filled this ritual for decades was gone, replaced by a clinical, chilling transaction. I had participated in my own betrayal to prove it existed. I picked up the secure phone. I pressed the button for Agent Waters. "This is Waters. It's Ella. He's gone. We heard everything. The audio is excellent. You did very well, Mrs. Washington." His voice was calm, professional. "The mention of debts and a solution is significant. We'll add it to the file. Are you all right?" I looked at the remains of our Sunday dinner on the table. The gravy was congealing in the boat. I am functional, I said. It was the most honest answer I could give. Understood. We'll be in touch after we review the recording. Get some rest. I hung up. Functional. It was not a state of being. It was a tool, a means to an end. I cleared the table. I washed the dishes. I scrubbed the roasting pan. With each mundane task, I sealed away the part of me that was still a mother, heartbroken. That part was a liability now. What remained was the functional part, the part that could listen, plan, and wait for the next move. The game was advancing, and I was still a player. Agent Waters called 2 days later. His voice on the secure phone was calm but carried a new weight. "Mrs. Washington, we've made progress. We've identified the individual using the alias The Fixer. While we'd like you to come to the field office to view a photographic lineup, your confirmation could be a significant step." I agreed without hesitation. Lorraine drove me. We did not speak much during the drive. She would reach over and pat my knee occasionally, a steadying gesture. The FBI field office was a modern, glass-faced building in a part of Atlanta I rarely visited. The interior was as Agent Waters had described weeks ago, sterile and busy. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. People in professional attire moved with purpose through the corridors. Agent Waters met us in the lobby. He greeted Lorraine with a polite nod. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Washington. This way, please." He led us down a hallway to a small, windowless room. It contained a metal table, 3 chairs, and a computer monitor on a cart. Agent Lim was already there, standing beside the monitor. "This is a standard procedure," Agent Waters explained. "You will be shown a series of photographs, one at a time. I will ask if you recognize the individual. There is no right or wrong answer. Please take your time with each image." I sat in the chair facing the monitor. Lorraine stood behind me, a silent pillar of support. Agent Waters took the seat beside me. Agent Lim operated the computer. "Ready?" Agent Waters asked. I nodded. The first photograph appeared on the screen. A white man in his 50s with a receding hairline and a bland expression. I had never seen him before. "No," I said. A second photo. A younger black man with a beard. "No." A third. A Hispanic man with tattoos on his neck. "No." The fourth photo appeared. I leaned forward slightly. The man was white, perhaps in his late 40s. He had a square, practical face, light brown hair cut short, and pale blue eyes that looked directly at the camera without expression. He wore a dark blue work shirt, the kind with a patch for a name. The photo had the quality of a driver's license or a work ID. I stared. A cold recognition settled in my stomach. It was not a face I knew well, but I had seen it. Recently. "Take your time," Agent Waters said quietly. "I have seen this man," I said. My voice was steady, but not in a personal context. He was doing work at Marcus's condo building. I saw him in the lobby once, maybe 4 months ago. He was carrying a toolbox. He had a clipboard. Marcus said they were doing some contractor work on the plumbing in the units above his. "Are you certain?" Agent Lim asked. "Yes, I remember because he held the elevator for me." He nodded but didn't speak. Marcus was annoyed by the noise from the work. He complained about it for weeks. The memory was crisp, now imbued with terrible meaning. This was not a digital phantom. This was a man who had been in my son's building, who had likely assessed the layout, the routines, a man who knew how to make accidents happen in homes. "That matches our intelligence," Agent Waters said, exchanging a glance with Agent Lim. "His name is Robert Dre. He operates a handyman and home repair service as a front. He has a criminal record for fraud and assault. He is a person of interest in 3 separate cases of fatal home accidents in the last 5 years. He is very careful. He leaves no forensic evidence. He engineers plausible tragedies." Hearing the details made the threat solidify from a shadow into a solid, physical form. Robert Dre, the fixer. He had stood 2 feet from me in an elevator. He had known who I was. He had been planning my death even then. Did Marcus introduce you? Agent Waters pressed. No, he did not. Marcus was not with me. I was visiting, and I saw the man in the lobby. Marcus mentioned the contractor work later, in passing. The separation felt intentional now. Marcus had kept his asset and his target apart. Thank you, Mrs. Washington. This is very helpful. Agent Waters signaled to Agent Lim, who turned off the monitor. This confirmation links Dre directly to your son's location. It strengthens the conspiracy case significantly. I stood up. My legs felt firm. What happens now? Now, we intensify our surveillance on Robert Dre. We also monitor any communication between him and Marcus, even more closely. Your identification gives us a firmer basis for certain tactical decisions. He chose his words carefully. It also means the threat is professional and imminent. You must continue to be vigilant. Lorraine spoke for the first time. You're sure this Dre character knows Ella is the target? Based on the emails and the financial discussions with Marcus, it is a near certainty, Agent Waters said. He doesn't need to know her name. He knows the address. He knows the objective. That is enough. The drive home was quiet for the first few minutes. Then Lorraine said, "A man with a toolbox. He was scoping the place out. Your son let him in the door." "He didn't just let him in," I corrected, my eyes on the passing buildings. "He hired him. He paid him a deposit for a job." The full, ugly picture was now clear. Marcus hadn't just stumbled upon a criminal online. He had engaged a local professional. He had brought the virus into his own house, knowing it would spread to mine. When I returned home, the familiar rooms felt different. Every external noise, a branch scraping the roof, the hum of the refrigerator, was evaluated not as a sound, but as a potential sign of entry. I checked all the window locks. I tested the deadbolt on the back door. I was not paranoid. I was informed. Robert Dre was a man who created accidents, a loose railing, a gas leak, a slip in the bathtub. I called Agent Waters on the secure phone that evening. "I have a question," I said. "If Robert Dre is so careful, how do you plan to catch him? He won't commit an obvious crime." "That's the challenge," Waters admitted. "We need to catch him in the planning or intercept him before he acts. The best evidence would be a direct conversation with Marcus about the act itself, a recorded conversation where the agreement is clear. We have the emails. We have Marcus's recorded comments about solutions, but we need something that ties Dre to the specific intent, beyond just taking money for consultation." "You need him to agree to it, on tape," I said. "That would be ideal, but to get that, Marcus would need to be in direct contact with him, discussing details. We are monitoring, but Dre is cautious. He may insist on in-person meetings, which are harder to capture." I understood. They needed the final piece, and to get it, Marcus would have to take the final step. I had a role to play in pushing him toward that step. The identification of the fixer's face had not frightened me into hiding. It had armed me with a new, grim certainty. The enemy had a face, and I had seen it. Now I had to help make him show his hand. 3 days after identifying the face of Robert Dre, Marcus arrived unannounced on a Wednesday afternoon. This was unusual. His visits were scheduled, predictable. The unexpectedness of it set my nerves on alert. I was in the living room reviewing a list of questions Agent Waters had suggested I might use in future conversations. I slid the notepad under a cushion as the doorbell rang. I opened the door. He held a manila folder, not a briefcase. His smile was wide, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile of a salesman. "Mom, hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. Come in." I stepped back, my senses sharp. I noticed he didn't kiss my cheek this time. He was focused on the folder. He walked to the kitchen table and sat, placing the folder before him. "I was in the area, and I've been doing some research. I wanted to share it with you." "Research?" I remained standing near the sink, putting a barrier of countertop between us. "About your future, your well-being." He opened the folder. Inside were glossy, full-color brochures. He spread them out like a winning hand of cards. I took your comment about Pine Ridge seriously. I looked into it, and I found some even better options. I moved closer, not to sit, but to look. The brochures showed serene landscapes, smiling seniors playing board games, modern dining rooms, Meadowvale Senior Living, Hillside Assisted Care Community. They were all located more than an hour's drive from Atlanta in rural counties. "Look at this one," he said, tapping a brochure. "Meadowvale. It's got a full-time nursing staff, all meals provided, organized activities. No maintenance worries, no property taxes. They have a shared equity program. You sell the house, invest a portion with them, and it covers your stay indefinitely. It's financially brilliant." His voice was eager, persuasive. He was using the same tone he'd once used to explain a clever school project. Now he was explaining the benefits of my displacement. I picked up the Meadowvale brochure. I turned a page. The rooms, while clean, looked small and impersonal. "It seems very remote," I said. "That's the beauty of it. Peaceful, quiet, no city noise, and secure. Gated community." He leaned forward. "Mom, I've been losing sleep over you here alone. What if you fell? What if there was a break-in? This would give me such peace of mind, and it would free you up. No more cooking, cleaning, yard work. You've earned a rest." Every word was a bullet point from a sinister script. Peace of mind, secure, free you up. He was not offering care. He was offering containment and asset liquidation. I placed the brochure back on the table. "It's a kind thought, Marcus, truly, but I am not interested." His smile faltered. A flash of irritation crossed his face. "Will you at least consider it? Look through the materials. I could set up a tour. It's a wonderful place." "I don't need a tour. My answer is no." My voice was pleasant but absolute. There was no room for discussion. The irritation solidified into something harder. The mask of concern slipped. "Why are you being so stubborn about this? This isn't just about you. Your situation affects me. My stress levels, my finances. I have a right to be concerned about my mother's safety and the financial legacy of this family." There it was, the core of it, laid bare. My finances, my stress, my legacy. I was a situation affecting him. I turned away from him and walked to a row of potted herbs on the windowsill. I picked up a small watering can and began to tend to them. It was a deliberate action, showing a calm I did not entirely feel. "This is my home, Marcus. I have lived here for 42 years. I raised you here. Every board in this floor holds a memory. I am not leaving so you can sell it and ease your debt." The silence behind me was thick and charged. I continued watering, my back to him. I heard the scrape of his chair. "You're being sentimental and short-sighted," he said, his voice low and tight. "This is a practical solution for both of us." I set the watering can down and turned to face him. He was standing, gathering the brochures with stiff, angry motions. "It is your solution, Marcus, not mine. My solution is to live in the home I own independently for as long as I am able. That is my final word on the subject." He shoved the brochures back into the folder. The friendly pretense was gone. His face was a closed fist of frustration. "Fine, have it your way, but don't come to me when you realize how hard it is to manage alone." "I never have," I said quietly. He stared at me, and for a moment I saw not my son but a stranger, a man thwarted in a business deal. He turned and walked out of the kitchen. I heard the front door open and close, harder than necessary. I stood at the sink listening to his car engine roar to life and fade away. My hands were steady. The confrontation had not rattled me. It had clarified everything. The conspiracy was no longer hidden in emails or vague dinner comments. It was on my kitchen table in full color. He had shown his hand. I waited 10 minutes. Then I retrieved the secure phone from its hiding place. I called Agent Waters. "He was just here," I said without preamble. He brought brochures for assisted living facilities, remote ones. He pushed hard. He cited his own stress and finances as reasons. When I refused, he became angry. He called me stubborn and short-sighted. Did he mention any specific next steps? Any timelines? Waters' voice was all business. No, but the pressure has been applied openly now. He knows I won't go willingly. This is significant, Mrs. Washington. This is the overt act moving beyond discussion. It shows intent. He is trying to achieve his goal through legal means first, which is consistent with Dre's pattern. Explore coercion, then if that fails, arrange an accident. Your refusal likely triggers the next phase. We need to be ready. I am ready, I said, and I was. The last thread of hope that this was a misunderstanding had been severed by those glossy brochures. What remained was a clear battlefield. He had made his offer, his poisoned chalice. I had declined. The next move was his, and I, with the FBI listening, would be waiting for it. The anger from Marcus's visit was a cold stone in my chest. It did not fade. It sat there, a constant heavy reminder. The functional part of me knew the next step was to wait for instructions from the FBI. The human part felt isolated, adrift in the betrayal. The house, my sanctuary, felt too quiet, too full of ghosts. Sunday arrived. I had not heard from Marcus, which was expected. I dressed for church. It was not a conscious decision born of sudden piety. It was muscle memory, a weekly ritual that provided structure. But this time, I needed more than structure. I needed my people. Lorraine was already in our usual pew, saved me a seat. She took my hand as I sat down, giving it a firm squeeze. She didn't ask questions. Her presence was a statement. The choir warmed up, the organist played a prelude, and the familiar rhythms of the service began to flow around me. I heard the words of the hymns, the scriptures, the prayers, but they seemed to pass over the surface of my mind. Inside, I was rehearsing the email phrases, Marcus's frustrated face, the glossy brochures. Then, during the time for testimonies, a quiet impulse moved me. It was not a grand feeling. It was a simple need to speak a truth, even a veiled one, into the supportive air of this room. Before I could second-guess it, I stood up and walked to the podium at the front. A soft murmur of recognition and encouragement rippled through the congregation. Many knew me as a steady, quiet presence. I rarely spoke from the front. I adjusted the microphone. My hands were dry. I looked out at the sea of faces, most of them older, many who had known me for decades, who had watched Marcus grow up. I saw curiosity, warmth, patience. "Good morning," I said. My voice was clear in the speakers. I don't often come up here. I'm better at listening. A few gentle nods. But this week, I've been carrying a weight, a trial that has to do with truth and the hiding of truth. The room grew still. I've learned that sometimes the people closest to you can look at you and see something else. They can see a problem to be solved, a burden to be lifted. They can see an obstacle where you see your life's work. I paused, choosing my words with care. I would not name names. I would not share specifics. But I would speak the emotional truth. It's a painful thing to be so misunderstood by someone you love, to have your loyalty repaid with calculation. I heard a soft amen from somewhere in the back. My faith tells me that truth will out, that light shines in darkness. But sometimes we have to be the ones to hold up the lamp, even when it's heavy, even when what it reveals breaks your heart. My voice wavered just once. I steadied it. I'm holding up my lamp now. It's hard. I'm angry. I'm sad. But I am not alone, because I have my faith, and I have you all, this community, your prayers, your kindness, your simple presence. That is the opposite of a calculation. It is a gift, and right now, it is my strength. I didn't know what else to say. Thank you for listening, I concluded, and stepped away from the podium. As I walked back to my pew, a wave of soft applause followed me. Not loud, but firm, supportive. Hands reached out to touch my arm as I passed. Whispers of, "We love you, Ella," and "Stay strong, sister." Lorraine's eyes were shining with unshed tears, but her smile was fierce with pride. I sat down and she immediately wrapped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me into a half hug. The service continued, but the atmosphere around me had changed. The isolation I had felt was gone, replaced by a tangible network of care. After the final hymn, people did not rush out. They came to me. Sister Clarice from the prayer group took both my hands. "Whatever you're facing, child, you put it on our prayer list. We'll bear it with you." Deacon Miller, a man in his 70s with kind eyes, said, "Ella, you need anything. A porch light fixed, a ride somewhere, somebody to just sit on the porch with you. You call me. You hear?" Old Mr. Peterson, who barely spoke to anyone, simply patted my shoulder and nodded once, a gesture of profound solidarity. They did not ask for details. They offered support. It was the unspoken code of our community. You see a sister in distress, you circle the wagons. It was the antithesis of Marcus's cold transactional world. In the parking lot, Lorraine finally spoke. That took courage. "It just took being tired of carrying it alone," I said. "You're not alone. You see that now, right? You have an army." She opened her car door. "And an army needs a general with a plan. You're still the general, Ella. We're just your troops." I drove home, the cold stone of anger still in my chest, but it was now surrounded by a warmth, a fortification. The community's love did not erase the betrayal, but it counterbalanced it. It proved that the world Marcus had chosen, a world of selfishness and deceit, was not the only world. My world, built on reciprocity and shared history, was stronger. When I entered my house, it did not feel haunted. It felt like what it was, my home, filled with the echoes of a lifetime of love, most of it genuine. The recent poison was an anomaly, an infection we were now treating. I picked up the secure phone. I had a new clarity. Agent Waters answered. "Mrs. Washington." "I'm ready," I said. "The next phase. Whatever you need me to do to move this forward." He's shown his hand. "I have the strength to see this through." My voice held no hesitation. "Your timing is good," he said. "We've been analyzing the situation. We agree it's time to be more proactive. We have a proposal. Can you come in tomorrow?" "Yes," I said. I looked out my kitchen window at the well-tended garden, the symbol of my independence. It was worth fighting for. And now, I was not fighting just for a house. I was fighting for the truth, and I had a congregation at my back. The proposal was a sting operation. Agent Waters laid it out in a secure conference room at the field office. "We have intercepted a message from Marcus to a new email address, likely a backup for Dre. Marcus expressed frustration that the primary path is blocked. He asked about alternative routes. We believe this is our opportunity," he continued. "We will have an undercover agent posing as an associate of the fixer make contact. He will suggest a meeting to discuss these alternatives. You will be present, Ella. Your role is to be the reluctant but pressured mother. You will imply that you are reconsidering your options due to Marcus's stress, but you have concerns about the facilities he showed you. You want to hear about other solutions directly from the source. This will draw Marcus out. He will have to speak plainly in front of you and the professional." The plan was simple and dangerous. It relied on Marcus's desperation and his belief in my pliability. "When and where?" I asked. "A quiet restaurant in Midtown. We've already secured a private booth. Recording devices will be everywhere. Our agent will wear a wire. You will wear one as well, for safety and redundancy. The goal is to get Marcus to explicitly confirm his understanding of the arrangement, that he is paying for a specific illegal outcome." I nodded. There were no alternatives. This was the culmination. I can do it. 2 days later, I dressed in a simple navy dress, something a woman being taken to a serious business lunch might wear. I fastened the wire myself, the process now routine. Lorraine drove me to the restaurant and waited in a car 2 blocks away, a silent sentinel. The restaurant was dimly lit, all dark wood and leather. Agent Waters, posing as a maitre d', discreetly guided me to a booth in the back corner. A man was already seated there. He was not Agent Waters' undercover agent. He was younger, with a sharp, intelligent face. He stood as I approached. "Mrs. Washington, I'm Michael, a friend of Robert's." His handshake was brief, his smile professional and empty. This was the undercover agent. I sat down opposite him. My heart was a steady, slow drum in my ears. We did not speak. Moments later, Marcus arrived. He looked surprised to see me already there, then pleased. He slid into the booth beside me, but his body angled toward the agent. "Michael, thank you for meeting on short notice." His voice was a low, confidential murmur. "Of course, Robert indicated you had complications." Michael's gaze flicked to me, then back to Marcus. "And this is the principal?" "This is my mother, Ella." Marcus placed a hand on my arm. It felt like a brand. "She's come to understand the pressures of the situation. She's open to a more definitive resolution." I kept my face a mask of weary concern. "Marcus has been so stressed," I said, my voice soft. "I don't want to be a burden, but those places he showed me, they felt like prisons. I just want what's best for everyone." Marcus squeezed my arm, a gesture he meant to be reassuring. "Michael has options Robert didn't fully explore, more discreet ones." Michael leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. "Let's be clear, Marcus. We're past brochures. My understanding is you require a permanent solution to the asset-liability issue, a natural conclusion. That carries a higher degree of difficulty and a higher cost. The retainer we discussed is for consultation and planning. The final fee is for execution. Do we have the same understanding?" The words were clinical, but their meaning was a blade in the quiet room. I held my breath. Marcus didn't even glance at me. His eyes were locked on Michael, hungry for the solution. "Yes, we have the same understanding. The retainer is ready. I need this handled before the end of the quarter. My liquidity situation is critical." "And the method?" Michael prompted. "Robert mentioned an accident, a fall. Does that still suit the environment?" Marcus finally looked at me, but he didn't see me. He saw the obstacle. The house has stairs. She gardens. A fall is believable. Can you make it look like a burglary? Something to obscure the motive? "I can design a plausible scenario," Michael said, "but you understand once I begin, there's no recall. You are purchasing a final outcome." "I understand." Marcus's voice was firm, decisive. The tone he used when closing a deal. "Just make it clean and soon." There was a finality in the air. The contract was sealed, not on paper, but on tape. My value had been assessed, my death commissioned. The transaction was complete. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, a heat. I thought I would cry from the sheer, horrifying sadness of it. But the tears that welled were not of grief. They were tears of conclusion, the last vestige of hope. The last phantom of the boy in the photo album evaporated in that booth. What remained was the truth, ugly and absolute. Marcus turned to me, his expression now one of performative relief. "See, Mom? Michael is a professional. He'll handle everything. You won't have to worry about a thing." I looked at my son, at the man who had just ordered my death for a better balance sheet. I gave a small, tremulous nod, the perfect picture of a confused old woman relinquishing control. "If you think it's best, dear." At that moment, the signal was given. Agent Waters and 2 other agents appeared at the entrance to the booth. Their badges were visible. The restaurant's ambient noise seemed to cease. "Marcus Washington," Agent Waters said, his voice ringing with official finality. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." The color drained from Marcus's face. He looked from the agents to me, to Michael, who was now also holding up an FBI credential. His confusion was profound, then it curdled into a dawning, horrified comprehension. His eyes locked on mine. In them, I saw the shock, the betrayal, and finally, the clear understanding that I had known. I had always known, since the moment his screen glowed. He said nothing as they handcuffed him and led him away. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly open, until he was turned around and guided out of the restaurant. I remained seated. Michael, the agent, offered me a glass of water. "You did exactly what was needed, Mrs. Washington. It's over." But it wasn't over. The legal process would begin. The trap had sprung. The evidence was irrefutable. I sipped the water, my hand perfectly steady. The wire felt heavy against my skin, a chain now turned into a key. The performance was finished. All that was left was the reckoning. The arrest was not the end. It was the beginning of a different kind of ordeal, one conducted in courtrooms and attorneys' offices. After Marcus was led away, Agent Waters drove me home. He spoke about procedure, about arraignments and federal charges. I listened, but the words flowed over the surface of a deep, still pool of fatigue within me. The performance was over. The energy that had sustained me for weeks was gone, leaving only the solid fact of what had been done. Robert Dre was arrested at his home that same evening. The FBI found detailed files on other clients and their problems. He would face multiple counts of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and more. His careful plans were reduced to evidence in labeled boxes. Marcus, through a court-appointed attorney, took a plea deal. Confronted with the email chain, the recorded Sunday dinners, and the damning restaurant conversation, his options vanished. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder for hire. His cooperation against Dre, providing details of their communications, was part of the agreement. He was sentenced to 15 to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Robert Dre received a life sentence, his pattern of crimes finally catching him. The prosecutor asked if I wished to give a victim impact statement at Marcus's sentencing. I said yes. The courtroom was formal and quiet. I wore a simple dark blue suit. Lorraine sat in the first row behind me. Agent Waters and Agent Lim were there, a professional presence. Marcus, in a standard-issue jumpsuit, sat with his attorney. He did not look at me. When it was my turn, I stood and walked to the lectern. I had written notes but did not need them. The words were etched into my bones. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear in the hushed room, "I am here today as the victim of the crime, but also as the mother of the man who committed it. This dual reality is the true punishment." I looked at Marcus then. He kept his eyes fixed on the table before him. For 42 years, my identity was tied to being his mother. I defined my successes and sacrifices through that lens. He was my greatest love and my most profound responsibility. He knew that. He counted on it. He believed that love was a weakness he could exploit. He called me the old lady problem. He discussed my death as a financial strategy. I paused, allowing the sterile, horrible facts to hang in the air. The betrayal is absolute. It is not the act of a stranger. It is the calculated choice of a man I raised. He did not see a person. He saw an asset and an obstacle. He sought to liquidate the asset by removing the obstacle. That is the core of his crime. I turned my gaze back to the judge. My impact statement is this: that man in the jumpsuit is no longer my son. The son I loved was an idea I nurtured, one he chose to murder long before he plotted to murder me. My loss is therefore twofold. I have lost the child of my past, and I have been forced to confront the monster of the present. The sentence you give him will not heal that loss. It will only affirm that in a world of his cold calculations, there is still a balance. There is still consequence. I sat down. My hands were steady. There were no tears. In the gallery, I heard Lorraine let out a soft, shaky breath. The judge called for a recess. After the sentencing was finalized, there was the matter of assets. As part of the plea and forfeiture, a portion of Marcus's seized holdings, the condo, some investments, were liquidated. The court approved the release of a sum to me as restitution. It was money stained with my intended death. I did not want it, but I knew what to do with it. I met with Agent Waters and a lawyer recommended by my church. I proposed creating a small nonprofit fund. Its purpose would be to provide legal and financial advice to seniors who suspected they were being exploited by family members or caregivers. We would call it the Sentinel Fund. A portion of the restitution would seed it. I would volunteer my time to run it, drawing on my experience and the network of trust I had in the community. The lawyer helped with the paperwork. The FBI, through Agent Waters, offered to provide informational materials on common fraud schemes. The church offered a small office in the community center. It took months to establish. During that time, I grieved, not for Marcus, but for the long, lonely years of single motherhood that now felt like a foolish investment in a corrupt venture. I grieved for the memories that had been poisoned. I allowed myself that sadness. It was a private, quiet process, like cleaning out a wound. Then, one bright Tuesday morning, Lorraine arrived at my house with paint supplies in the trunk of her car. The office is empty. The walls are a dreadful beige. Today we paint. We drove to the community center. The small room that would be the Sentinel Fund's office was indeed a sad beige box, but it had a large window that looked out onto a garden. We spread drop cloths, opened cans of a soft, warm white paint, and set to work. We did not speak much at first. The sound of the brushes swishing, the rollers moving was enough. The rhythm of the physical labor was therapeutic. After an hour, Lorraine said, I was thinking, we should have a workshop, recognizing the signs of financial abuse. You could speak. I could handle the tech part, show people how to check email histories. I cut in a fresh edge along the ceiling. That's a good idea. We could invite Agent Waters to talk about when to involve law enforcement. See, Lorraine said, dipping her roller. You're already building something. From that awful mess, you're building something good. I stepped back to look at the wall. The new white paint was bright, covering the old, tired color. It was not a metaphor. It was a simple, necessary act of renewal. This room would be a place of prevention, of empowerment. It would not erase what happened to me, but it might keep it from happening to someone else. Later, as we cleaned the brushes at the deep sink in the community center's kitchen, Lorraine smiled at me. You look like yourself again, Ella, not the heartbroken version, the real version. I realized she was right. The weight was different. It was no longer the crushing burden of betrayal. It was the manageable weight of purpose. The love I had poured into Marcus had been betrayed. But the love from my community, from Lorraine, from my church, from Agent Waters, who treated me with respect, that love had held me up. Now I could redirect that maternal care, that protective instinct outward. The revenge was complete. It was not violent or loud. It was the cold, precise application of justice. I had used my wits, my community, and the truth as my weapons. Marcus was in prison. Dre would never walk free. My home was still mine. And in this small, freshly painted room, I had found a new reason to get up in the morning. I looked around the clean, bright space. It was empty, but full of potential. Tomorrow, I said, we'll bring in the desk.